Welcome back, bienvenue, and all that jazz. It's time to talk about some books, or today in particular, I'm talking my 15 favorite reads for 2022. I know a lot of people do a top 10, but I didn't want to. So I'm doing a top 15, so what are you going to do about it? And so I already have my worst books of 2022 video up, so if you want to see some snarky salt, please feel free to check that out. And that was called Stink, Stank, Stunk. So for the top 15, let's call this Bing, Bang, Bong. So without any further ado, let's just drive straight in. And similar to many booktubers, I only have books that were new to me in the year of 2022 on this list. Otherwise, it would just be a list of the rereads that I did this year. And you already know I love Lord of the Rings. We already know I love Empire of the Vampire. Like, I don't need them to be on this list. I'd rather talk about new books and maybe give you some new things to think about maybe putting on your TBR, because you're welcome. And the only other thing is this is in ascending order. So these are ranked, and I will go from 15th place all the way up to first place. So without any further preamble, etc., let's just jump straight in. In 15th place, we have Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. This is book 1 of Supernatural Investigations. This is an adorable middle grade series. So if you don't have any idea what this is about, basically follow Amari Peters, whose brother has gone missing, and we really have no idea why, but Amari has been told that her brother is dead, but she has never believed this. And one day a mysterious suitcase appears in her closet and she gets whisked away to the Department of Supernatural Investigations, and maybe her brother's not dead. Who knows? She's going to try to figure out what's going on while also having like cool, like Men in Black meets magic school type summer camp. And it's just a lot of fun. I would highly recommend it if you want a very fast-paced, whimsical, fun, middle grade series. This one is amazing. Then in 14th place, we have The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. And this is, I think it's probably older young adult or young adult. I'm not totally sure what age range it fits in. I don't really care either. It is a retelling of a Korean folk tale, and it is just so much fun. In this one, basically, there are these different villages, and the villages believe that they have to sacrifice somebody to the sea god every, I think it's season, in order for him to not like destroy their villages with rain and storms and things of that nature. And so at the very beginning of this book, we are following our main character, her brother, and his fiance, as his fiance is supposed to be sacrificed to the sea god, and instead our main character jumps in her place and gets taken to the spiritual realm. It feels very Studio Ghibli-esque. It is so much fun, and there is a romantic element, but that wasn't the part that drew me in. I just loved the strange, whimsical, undersea, spiritual world that felt very much like Spirited Away. And so if you like just that fun, kind of nonsensical world building of a folktale kind of mixed with very Studio Ghibli vibes, I would highly recommend The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. It's one of those that I had a lot of fun while reading it, but then as the year went on, I just looked back on it with more and more fondness, and now here it is making my top books of the year. So what does that tell you? Then in 13th place, we have Peace and Turmoil by the wonderful booktuber Elliot Brooks. This is her debut novel of her fantasy series that I believe, from what I recall, is slated to be 5 or 6 books long, and she is currently working on writing book 2 at this moment as we speak. This is very political fantasies. There are these different kingdoms and they're vying for power and that kind of thing, and there's also this like fiend scourge, very feeling like a la Final Fantasy. So if you want a very fun blend of character-driven fantasy in a political world with this like mysterious, mystical threat of these fiends, then I would highly recommend you check out Peace and Turmoil. In the first section of the book, we kind of follow our main characters and kind of get to know them and get to know the political landscape. And then in the second act, we have this very dramatic battle sequence, which has the kind of most intense and kind of gruesome ending to it, which I was here for. And then in the third act, we start having the political machinations coming into play. So if you like character-driven political fantasy with really cool monsters and cool magic, and where the magic is really prevalent, it's not like a eons ago the magic was here and now magic is coming back to the land. It's not there. It's not that. There is magic in this world, and it's just a lot of fun. There's also a lot of cool extras in this, like different kind of interlude art. And then Elle is actually a very talented artist herself, and so she did a lot of character drawings throughout, which you can also see on her website, but she has different drawings that she did herself of the characters, and so it is just a lot of fun. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, a booktuber book, but Elle is a very talented writer, and I had a lot of fun with this book, and I would highly recommend you check out Peace and Turmoil. I have a full spoiler-free review for Peace and Turmoil that I'll link up above and down below if you want more of my thoughts and more information about what this book is about, because it is good and you should try it. Then in 12th place is The Sapphire Altar by David Dalglish. This is book 2 in the Vagrant Gods trilogy, and it just came out in January, but I read it in December, and it is just a continuation of a very fun series. So instead of talking about The Sapphire Altar, since it's book 2 in a trilogy, I will instead talk more about The Bladed Faith, which is book 1. And so in this world, we are following kind of this island nation where this kind of opposing evil empire ruled by this kind of political demigod figure known as the God Incarnate has come in and killed the ruling family and has put in place people that are loyal to him to kind of retrain and kind of brainwash the society into worshiping him instead. And when they do this, they go into these different countries, and each country has their own gods and goddesses that are actually physical beings in the world that interact with their congregations, I guess. I don't really know the correct word for it. But when this evil empire comes in, they send in these demigod-like paragons that actually fight and kill these gods and goddesses. And then they go about that whole kind of campaign of training the people to worship the God Incarnate instead. And so we follow a young boy, Cyrus, after his family gets murdered because they were the ruling king and queen of this island nation, and he is starting to maybe be trained to lead this kind of underground rebellion to rise up against this evil God Incarnate, and it goes from there. It is very intense, very action-packed. The very opening sequence is the battle between the paragons and the two gods of this island nation, and there are mysteries and secrets about all of the different facets of this world, and it is just such a fun time. And The Sapphire Altar just kind of continues that trend and cranks it up to 11 with dramatic reveals all the way through the very end. And I'm so excited to read book 3 whenever it is available so that I can complete this trilogy, because I need to know what happens next. And I think you will too. So if you like Gods Among Us, you like fast-paced, you like rising against the evil empire, you like queer relationships that are on page. Their side character is not the main character, but there's no real romance forward element in this book. There just are kind of relationships on the side because real people have relationships. And so some of them are queer, and I just love seeing this kind of more queer normative take. It's just so much fun, and I would highly recommend you check out this series. And I do have a full spoiler-free review of The Bladed Faith. So again, if you want more details, thoughts, feelings, emotions about that first book, I will link that spoiler-free review video for you above and below. So feel free to check that out if you are so inclined. Then up next in number 11 spot is The Final Strife by Sara El Arifi. This is book 1 in, I cannot recall the name of the series. I think it's like The Burning or something. There's something about burning. I don't know. But it's the first in a new adult epic fantasy world. This world feels very almost like dystopian-esque, where we have kind of our caste system and a competition where people can kind of rise up above their station to become kind of part of the political government of this place. And so in this world, the caste system is set up based on your color of your blood. There are the ghost bloods, which are at the very bottom of the rung, that are dehumanized because of a rebellion that took place in the past. So when these people are born, they have their hands chopped off and their tongues removed to ensure that they remain in servitude. We then have the blue-blooded people, which I believe are called the Dusters. Don't quote me, I'm pretty sure that's what they're called, and they're kind of like the working class people. And then we have the people at the top have red blood, and they're known as Embers. And at some point in the past, there was this kind of revolution that took place where they took red blood babies and swapped them with blue blood babies. So the blue blood babies would be raised up in the kind of elite society, and these red blooded babies would be raised in the working class society to kind of help bring about this revolution that they were looking for. There is a magical competition aspect. It is a much smaller portion of this book than you might expect or want, so just be aware of that. There is also a lot of cool underpinnings to what's happening in this political system. There's mysteries that abound, and again, at the end of the book, there were some reveals that were like excuse me. So I think it's very exciting to see where it goes next in the Battle Drum, which I think actually comes out this year. So there's plenty of time for you to get on board. And just be aware that this is a blood-based magic system. So they have these almost like lancets and bracelets where they can kind of pierce a vein, and then they do rune magic with their blood. So if you're weird about needles or blood or whatever, then maybe not this one, but it is so much fun. So I would still recommend you check it out regardless. And I think I have a spoiler-free review video for this one as well, which again, like all of them, I will link if you need more deets about this book. Now we're inching into the top 10. So in 10th place, we have The Blood of the Spear by Mark Timoney. This is another self-published work. And this is very much inspired by the Wheel of Time and its world building. So if you liked the Wheel of Time world building, but you wanted it a little bit less sexist and a little bit more kind of current times, then I would highly recommend you check out The Blood of the Spear. It also kind of has a lot of the Forgotten Realms vibes of the classic fantasy that I love, mixed with the more modern trends of having a more character-focused narrative. So I would highly recommend, if you like classic fantasy, but with like a more modern twist, this is a great place to go. It has bone dragons, it has cool demon things. So in this world, at some point in the past, there was this war with these summoners, and these summoners could basically pull these demon-like beings into this world. And at some point, the summoners kind of have gone away, and we now just have kind of pockets of demons remaining. So at the very beginning of the book, we're following this pair of brothers who may or may not be linked to that bloodline of summoners, and they kind of end up going on in a quest adventure, if you will. And so we get to see a lot of the different aspects of this world. We get to see a lot of the cool magic. There's like this cool magic tower school setting that we get to dip a toe into that I really hope we see more of in book 2. We also get to learn about this other like star-based, almost prophecy magic system. And it's just a cool adventure fantasy with an awesome cast of characters. And so if you like that classic fantasy, that Wheel of Time, but with a more modern twist and cool bone dragons, cool magic, cool all of it, then you should definitely check out The Blood of the Spear. And I believe I have a spoiler-free review video for this as well. So again, links. And then in 9th place, we have The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams. This is book 1 in the Winnowing Flame trilogy. And like many, I heard about this because Elle from Elliot Brooks has been screaming about the series for probably years at this point, and I finally picked it up, and I do not regret doing so. So The Ninth Reign is this very interesting fantasy sci-fi blend where we have a very strong kind of fantasy element where there's basically elves that are kind of also vampiric in nature, and in this world there's kind of this cyclical return of these gross bug-like beings that kind of arise and kind of have a war. And the elven-like beings are kind of on the decline. And so usually these elven-like beings have their sacred war beasts that they fight this rising scourge with. But current times, the elves are not doing so hot, and things have been forgotten. So we go on this kind of fun, almost Tomb Raider feeling kind of adventure, trying to understand more about these creepy alien beings and what they are, why they are, all of that kind of stuff. So if you want a very strong fantasy world, there is magic, there is cool, like kind of classic fantasy races like the elves, but with a severe twist on them, with a mix of like a sci-fi horror antagonist and these creepy bug things, then I would highly recommend you check this out. It's kind of like if you took Tomb Raider and mixed it with Alien and Annihilation and put that all together in a book with some magic, then that is kind of The Ninth Reign. And it is so fun. I would highly recommend you check it out for just the unique world building alone. There's also one character in particular that I really fell in love with in book 1, but the other characters I didn't start coming around to until book 2. So just know that maybe if you're like a specifically character-driven reader, maybe the Winnowing Flame won't give you everything that you want, but the world building is so cool, I think it kind of makes up for it. So you should still give it a try. Then in 8th place, we have Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. This is book 3 in the Winter Night trilogy. This is a historical fantasy, I would say. It has elements of real Russian history mixed with Russian folklore to give you this very adult fairy tale vibe type of story. And so book 3, just the expansion of the magic system, the expansion of the world building, some introduction of some new characters. I just loved every second of it. It was so good. But instead of spending all this time talking about book 3 in the trilogy, instead let's talk a little bit about book 1, which is The Bear and the Nightingale. And The Bear and the Nightingale in particular really has that fairy tale vibe. I would say books 2 and 3 feel less fairy tale-esque and more grounded in the history with real people, places, and events. And so just know that as you kind of go on, that you will get more and more of that kind of more historical fantasy feel. But with book 1, we are following our main character, Vasilisa, or she's known as Vasya, and she's kind of bucking against the gender and societal norms of she's supposed to marry a nice man, settle down, and have his babies, and just stay at home. But that's kind of not in her nature. She's this kind of more wild, free, in tune with nature person. And so in the Winter Night trilogy in particular, I think it really delves into kind of this look at Christianity and how it kind of was at odds with natural, more pagan belief systems, where as it came in, it would always other and vilify the more pagan belief systems that were in place before it. And so you see that embodied in certain characters. And so there's just this really interesting underpinning thematic resonance about religion at that time and how Christianity could be the enemy depending on your viewpoint and at what period in time and where in the world we were talking about. And so I just think there is more nuance there if you want to dig into it, or you can just have this fun fairy tale adventure for adults. There are dark moments, there are basically zombies in book 1. Like, it is just super fun. And so if you want a unique adult fairy tale, then you should check out the Winter Night trilogy. Then in 7th place is maybe a surprise, and this is Night of the Dragon by Julie Kagawa. This is book 3 of the Shadow and the Fox trilogy. So Shadow of the Fox is this very fun adventure fantasy with strong Japanese folklore elements, where it's almost like Inuyasha vibes, where we're kind of going on this adventure because in this world, there is this sacred dragon scroll that if you bring the pieces of the scroll together on a certain night every 1,000 years, you can summon the dragon and make a wish. And so obviously, we're kind of going on this quest to find the pieces of the scroll before the evil people do in order to stop them from making some kind of evil wish. And so that's kind of the basic premise. We have this main character who is this half kitsune, which is like half fox spirit. And so she has this kind of cool kitsune magic, which is very much based in illusion and kind of mischief making stuff, which is really in line with the more traditional folklore aspects of kitsune in Japan. And then we have this kind of grumpy, dour, kind of samurai, but he's more of like a shinobi, so that's more of like a ninja. So he is just really interesting, and so we kind of go off on a quest with these two characters and some people that we meet along the way. And so book 3 in particular, I was surprised because book 1 and 2 were just fun. I think I gave them like 3.5 to 4 stars. They were just fun. And then book 3 out of nowhere punched me in the feels, and I was just like, no. And I was just shocked at where it went because it is YA fantasy. And so I think a lot of us have this kind of preconceived notion that YA means lighter, or it doesn't kind of go there. And I think you would be surprised that this trilogy will go there. And it is just so much fun. So if you want to know kind of more about Japanese folklore, I don't know how accurate all of it is, but it is just a phenomenal time, and it will be a very different folklore system, mythology system than the kind of classic Western European fantasy that we are all so used to. And so I think even if you're not somebody who reads YA, then 1, you're missing out on a lot of fun, and 2, you can have fun adventures and have dark themes even in things geared towards younger adults. So I would still highly recommend you check out The Night of the Dragon. Then in 6th place, we have Age of War by Michael J. Sullivan. This is book 3 in the Legends of the First Empire series, which is the prequel to the prequel series of the Ryuria Revelations. So if you don't know, the kind of Ryuria world, or the world of Elan, is written in a very non-traditional way. So the originally published sextet, which is published in 3 bind-ups of 2 books each, is following Royce and Hadrian in this kind of buddy cop-like story. From what I understand, I haven't read it. And then after that, he published the Ryuria Chronicles, which is a prequel about how Royce and Hadrian kind of came to be a duo. And then he wrote The Legends of the First Empire, which is 3,000 years in the past, which tells the legends of how that first empire came to be that we see, I'm assuming, the ruins of or something in Ryuria. I really have no idea because I haven't gotten there. And so The Legends of the First Empire is another sextet because he seems to like write 6-book series. And it is just really fun and like moving. Like, there are some really surprisingly emotional gut punches that he will throw at you throughout the series, with Age of War being kind of like the pinnacle of that. Like the ending of Age of War, whew, like, okay. But again, this is another one of those ones similar to the Blood of the Spear, that if you like classic fantasy, Forgotten Realms fantasy, sword and sorcery, but with a more modern twist where we have those kind of classic races, dwarves, elves that you're used to, but they all have their twists on them. They're the Frey and the Durg in this world, or the Belgric Lungrians, I think is what the dwarves are called. And it feels like that classic, fun adventure fantasy, but again, with a more focus on characters. There's an awesome wolf companion, which I all know that a lot of you love animal companions. It does have, at times, a more like humorous approach. There are some things where you're really going to have to suspend your disbelief. There are some, I think there's like, our crew of characters comes up with thousands of years inventions in like a very short period of time, like the wheel, the arrow, bam, 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 we're just discovering, and it's with our crew of like 5 or 6 people. So if that bugs you, then I think that could take you out of the Legends of the First Empire and you may not like it as much. But if you are one of those people who's just along for the fun ride, then I think that it's a great time. And book 1 is Age of Myth, and I have a full spoiler-free review video for that one as well, which again, I will link for you to peruse at your leisure. Okay, now we are in the top 5. So in 5th place, I have The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. This is book 1 in the Burning Kingdoms trilogy. So in this series, again, we're kind of looking at that rising up against the evil empire, but this one is much more Indian inspired, and the magic system is focused on this cool plant-based magic that has kind of body horror elements, because when you go kind of into the forest, you can be infected by this rot, and this rot causes like plants to basically grow inside of you until it kills you. And so we are following 2, arguably 3 perspectives. We have Priya, who is a handmaiden in the house of kind of the government official of this province that was overtaken by the Parijat Vipin Empire. And that Parijat Vipin Empire, the sister of the current ruler, is known as Malini. And in the very beginning, in the prologue of this book, her brother is trying to get her to willingly burn herself alive in order to give this kind of magical edge to her brother so that he can continue his kind of conquest, if you will. And she refuses to. And so she gets sent to this old temple in the province where Priya is from. And Priya seems to have some ties to this temple. And so Priya and Malini meet because Malini is sent there to basically either die or reconsider and become a willing sacrifice. And that's kind of where we kick it off. And obviously in book 2, things really expand. The magic system explodes. We get a lot of information about the world building and how the magic came to be. And this is just very good. And there is a subplot that is a kind of slow burn sapphic romance element. So if you want amazing fantasy with a really good slow burn romance kind of subplot, then I would highly recommend you check this out. And again, I have a full spoiler-free review video for this if you want more information. Then in 4th place, I have The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, which I would feel remiss in my duties as a booktuber if I didn't mention that I do know that there is some controversy surrounding TJ Klune as an author, which if you Google, I'm sure you can figure it out for yourself. And I still love this book and choose to support this book, but that is a decision that I made for myself. And obviously you should look into the information and make choices for yourself about whether or not you still would want to read or support this author. But The House on the Cerulean Sea is basically whimsical middle grade, but for adults. So we're following this basically social worker. His name is Linus, and he's very just like blah about his life, his job. He just kind of goes to work every day. And at some point he gets tasked with this case where he's supposed to go to this orphanage on this island with kind of dangerous children. And he is supposed to go and kind of decide if the conditions are good for them, if their caretaker is taking good care of them, and that kind of stuff, because these magical children could be potentially dangerous to the world. And so they are very adorable, very whimsical. All of the children have very strong personalities, and there is this kind of slow burn male-male romance at its core. And it's just like about finding yourself and finding joy and love, and it's just this most wholesome, wonderful time. And I love this book so much. If only I had like Under the Whispering Door half as much, that would have been lovely, but here we are. But The House in the Cerulean Sea is amazing. And so if you're just looking for that kind of escapist, cozy fantasy, then I think that The House in the Cerulean Sea will really hit that spot. And now we are in the top 3, which on any given day, if you ask me, these could all be kind of interchangeable, but this is the order that I settled on for today. And I know that some people are going to be like, excuse me, and want to fight me in the comments, but whatever, bring it on, ho. So in third place, I have A Storm of Swords. This is book 3 in the Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin, and this was phenomenal. So I had been a longtime fan of the Game of Thrones TV show. I have watched it seasons 1 through 8 multiple times. I just really loved that show so much, but I had never read the books because in my mind, I remembered trying them when I was maybe in my late teens, and they just the writing style for whatever reason didn't click with me at the time. But then I went back and finally tried them again for the first time last year, and it was just, I read the first 3 books. They are phenomenal. They are humongous, but they are just so good. And if you somehow don't know about what a Game of Thrones is about, I am shocked, but it is literally what it sounds like. It is political fantasy at its core. There are fantasy horror elements and these creepy zombie-like things. There may or may not be dragon eggs, and there was dragons in the past. So I would just, if you haven't read a Game of Thrones or given it a try, I would highly recommend you give it a shot. Just be aware, if you are reading from these illustrated editions, I don't know why the publisher did this, but they put the illustrations at the start of every chapter when they occur. There's a lot more illustrations in the first one. In the second and third book, the illustrations are much fewer, but they're always at the start of the chapter to which they are associated, which is kind of spoilery. So just be aware of that. So if you're reading from these as a first read, just know that you may or may not get spoiled by pictures at the start of chapters, which is super annoying. But I think A Storm of Swords really cemented itself as my favorite of what I've read of A Song of Ice and Fire so far, because it started to have a lot more changes from what I remember from the show. The fantasy horror elements are much stronger in the books than they were in the show. And I just love this cast of characters so much. I love this world so much. I really don't know what it would be like jumping in blind, not having seen the Game of Thrones TV show at all. I don't know what the reading experience would have been like, but this just gave me more of a world that I'm already in love with, more of characters that I'm already in love with. And so this definitely is deserving of a spot in my top 3. Then in second place, which I know this is where people are going to fight me, but in second place I have Clockwork Princess, which is the conclusion to the Infernal Devices trilogy, which is the second published-ish series of the Shadowhunters world by Cassandra Clare. And this is young adult, kind of paranormal fantasy, I guess I would say. It feels very much like Buffy, but if Buffy had kind of more magical-ish weaponry and magical runes to make herself stronger. So if you took Buffy, added a dash more magic, and added kind of angel versus demon kind of dynamic, and then had a lot more angst and better love triangles, then that would be the Infernal Devices. And if you also took it back to the 1800s, that's the Infernal Devices. And there's kind of a cool steampunk element to this one with these creepy automatons. And it's just so good. This has to be the best love triangle I've ever read in my entire life. It was phenomenally done. And I'm not somebody who usually appreciates a love triangle. Usually I kind of you know who's going to end up and be the end game. And you know it's going to be the bad boy versus the good boy. And they're all kind of cliche. But this one did stuff in such a unique way. And I just loved the characters. And so it's just so good. The Infernal Devices was kind of published concurrently with the last 3 books in the original The Mortal Instruments sextet, because The Mortal Instruments was originally published as a trilogy, and then she went back and kind of added a second trilogy, and while she was doing it, it was interspersed with the Infernal Devices. And there are some very strong crossovers between those final 3 books in The Mortal Instruments and the Infernal Devices. So I think for full impact and reveal shock factor, you either want to read the Immortal Instruments and then have a long break and forget a lot of it before the Infernal Devices, or you want to kind of intersperse them and do actual publication order for these 2 series, because they have very strong crossovers that kind of rely on each other. So just be aware going in. But if you just want to read one series and just the trilogy and not the original 6 books, because the original 6 books have this weird fake incest trope, which, why? But that's not a problem in the Infernal Devices. And there is a continuation following children from some of the people in the Infernal Devices, which is the conclusion to is being published this year. It's The Last Hours. And so if you just like the kind of period stuff, you also have 6 books to read there. And it's just so good. The kind of emotions that I was going through towards the end of Clockwork Princess, I was just shocked. This trilogy kind of took over my life for 2 days around New Year's. I read the whole trilogy, and it's just so good. And that leaves only what is in first place. Can you guess what my favorite book of the year was? I'm really curious. If you've been following my channel, so this is the end of my first year on BookTube. I started my channel in, I think, December 30th in 2021. And so if you've been following my channel and you have any inkling what you think my favorite book of the year is, please leave it in the comments down below, just because I'd be really curious what you think it would be. But without any further ado, my favorite book of the year was Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer. This is book 1 of Rivenworld. I can't remember what the series name is. It was originally published as a standalone, but I think people loved it and the response was so strong that she decided to kind of write more in this world. And there was definitely more story there when you get to the end of Dragon Mage. So I'm really curious to see where it goes in book 2. But Dragon Mage is phenomenal. So for a lot of the series on this list, I think you can tell that I love classic adventure fantasy. My Forgotten Realms, my Sword and Sorcery, just love it. Eat that up all day. And then Dragon Mage is really the pinnacle of combining that with the more modern trends of really impactful, moving character work. And so in this world, we are following our main character, and he is neurodivergent. So he is on the autism spectrum, and it's just, I think, phenomenally well done, having a neuroatypical kind of lead character. And the magic system is really kind of interesting, where they kind of tie knots of this kind of like almost etheric material in order to elicit different kind of effects. And they kind of can do cool, more normal and elemental based magic and just kind of cool things along that line. And there are people who can natively draw on that magic. And then there's this kind of competing group which have to literally like pull the essence out of the native magic users and drink it in order to be able to use magic themselves. So there's this really like sinister element. And this is for people, if you don't want a ton of romance, like I don't think there's really any. There is like a romantic relationship that really gets developed off page, but it's not at all the point of this book. But if you want a strong platonic brotherhood that's almost on par with like a Frodo and Sam, like it is so good in this book. Like I cannot tell you. And it is a very long, chunky book, which I hear sometimes the pacing for some people didn't work, but I was just so transported. And in this world, there's also kind of this hidden magical world where you have to like open a portal to get through to it. And in that magical world is where the native magic is. And so there's kind of a battle between the more mundane world and the magic world, and people wanting to get the magic. And there's dragon writing, and just, oh, it's so good. I want to reread it. I read it back in January of 2022, and it stayed one of my favorite books of all year. And it ended up here at first place. And so obviously I cannot recommend Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer highly enough. It is another self-published book, but it is phenomenal. As are all of the books on this list. Like, I loved each and every one of these books. They really just transported me. As a reader, I am somebody who really just likes the transportive nature of fantasy, where I can just be taken on this fun adventure. And if you are at all like me, then I would highly recommend you check out all of these books and any of the reviews if you need more information. But that concludes this list of best books of 2022. But if you'd like to let me know your favorite book of 2022, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you just want to leave an emoji, is there a dragon? Oh, there has to be dragon. Leave me some kind of dragons for Dragon Mage. Other than that, please subscribe if you haven't already for more bookish shenanigans like this from moi. But that will do it for today's video. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!